So let's see this passage on biological sciences. The broader topic is, of course, the natural sciences here. So let's see. So the spatial conservation refers to the basically the practice of protecting and managing natural and ecological, okay, areas based. Why am I able to see the blurred? Okay, so that is the case, right? Let me just work it out, okay? Just a second. Okay, so spatial conservation refers to the practice of protecting and managing natural and ecological areas based on their spatial characteristics. So basically, they say that spatial conservation basically means protecting and managing natural areas by focusing on their geographic locations and physical features. That is basically what the spatial stands for. Okay, it involves the identification, preservation, and sustainable use of specific geographic locations that are ecological, valuable, or vulnerable. Okay, so they say that this spatial conservation, okay, it basically includes finding important areas, okay, and preserving them, protecting them, okay, and sustainable use. So sustainable use means that using them carefully so that the nature is not damaged, okay, and these areas may be very important for ecosystems, or they are highly vulnerable or can be easily harmed, okay. Now, to enhance the feasibility, implementation, and effectiveness of spatial conservation measures for seabirds, motivations for marine habitat. Conservation should not be limited to foundational seabird science and evidence, but also balanced with complementary motivation for broader ecosystem health and functioning. Okay. Now they say that to make conservation efforts for seabirds successful, okay, people should not rely only on scientific studies about seabirds. Okay. They say that they should also think about protecting the entire marine ecosystem. Okay, because healthy oceans help seabirds survive basically. Okay, now to effectively implement spatial measures, all relevant policies, regulations, and legislation needs to be identified or developed. Okay, so they say that for spatial conservation to work properly, proper laws, okay, and policies and regulations and government rules, okay, must be created or identified. Now, spatial targets for marine protection may come from national commitments to international biodiversity targets, including the recently developed high ambition coalition for nature and people, with a goal to protect at least 30% of the planet by 2030. They say countries often set targets for protecting marine areas based on international agreements on biodiversity. And one example is this is no what they call high ambition coalition, okay, for nature and people, which aims to protect at least 30% of the earth by 2030. Other international designations such as UNESCO World Heritage Sites can also support the development of spatial conservation measures for seabirds. Okay, so they say that international organizations like UNESCO World Heritage Sites can also help protect important areas for seabirds. Okay, even non-spatial policies and legislation may provide context and motivation for spatial protection. So they say that even laws do not directly focus on protecting specific places can still encourage or support spatial conservation efforts, right? In the case of seabird conservation, the enabling policy to protect birds at sea may be found in national or international commitments such as the Canada United States Migratory Bird Treaty Act that prohibits harm to seabirds, or the UN FAO National Plan of Actions for Seabirds that includes addressing bycatch of the species in the commercial fisheries. Okay, now they say basically that in the case of seabird conservation, okay, seabirds are protected through agreements, and then they talk about couple of agreements. The one is this mbta, okay, which makes harming seabirds illegal, okay, and the another is this unfao national policy for seabirds, which tries to reduce accidental catching of seabirds in fishing nets, okay. Now identifying and understanding the relevant policies, legislation and regulations is an important steps towards the implementation of spatial conservation measures. So they say that understanding and identifying the right laws and policies is very important for successfully applying spatial conservation method. Okay. Now basically we can see that overall it's a very lengthy paragraph, but it includes a lot of examples. Okay. The key ideas, they say that the passage paragraph, of course, it talks about the spatial conservation. Okay. And they say that spatial conservation protects, what is this spatial conservation is that it basically protects important ecological areas, okay, specifically for seabirds, okay. So and it depends on scientific research, and what is required is a supportive national and international policies, okay, laws and plus conservation commitments, okay. Now in case if we need to get into this the second paragraph, okay, so the second paragraph says that the level of protection afforded to a particular area is a second consideration for the implementation likelihood of the spatial conservation measures. Okay, so they say that another important factor in deciding whether spatial conservation can be implemented is how much protection will be given to that area. Okay, so is the likelihood of spatial conservation, the legal is the afforded to a particular, the level of protection, okay, that how much of protection will be given to that area. Okay, now comprehensive protection measures differed from targeted protection measures in important ways. Okay, so they say that there are two types of protection methods and they are different from each other in important ways: comprehensive protection and then targeted protection. Okay, whereas comprehensive protection may exclude all activities from a particular area, targeted measures restrict some activities while allowing others to continue if deemed compatible with conservation objectives. Okay, so now they say that the comprehensive protection, comprehensive, the name itself, no, comprehensive. Okay, so comprehensive protection methods, okay, so comprehensive protection methods, okay, it means all human activities are banned in their areas. Okay, whereas targeted protection basically restricts certain activities. Okay, while other activities can continue if they do not harm conservation goals. Okay. Now, implementation of comprehensive measures can be expected to be far more difficult, perhaps spatially so if the process is participatory in nature. Okay. So they say that it is much harder to apply comprehensive protection spatially when many stakeholders are involved in decision making. Okay. Now, limitations imposed by comprehensive measures on economic activities, especially fishing, can be difficult to accept. Okay. So they say that completely banning activities like fishing or other economic work can be very difficult for people and industries to accept. Okay. Now, this reality can lead to the limitation of size to a relatively small areas, and because of these difficulties fully protected areas are often kept small in size. Okay, conversely, targeted measures have relatively greater feasibility across scales, spatial, especially at larger scales. Okay, so they say that on the other hand, targeted protection measures are easier to apply even over larger areas because they allow some activities to continue. Okay, so basically what this paragraph is saying is that the type of protection, okay, which is used in spatial conservation, okay, that basically affects how easy it is to implement. And then they talk about the two: one, comprehensive protection that bans all the activities, while targeted protection that actually restricts certain activities, and they say that it is easier to apply on a larger scale. Okay, fortunately, an approach exists that presents an interesting avenue for navigating trade-off between types of measures, notably in terms of achieving adequacy of scale. Okay, so they say that luckily there is a method. Okay, that helps balance different types of conservation methods, okay, measures, especially to make sure that the protected area is large enough to be effective, okay. In contrast to a conservation network or marine spatial plan, a protected area mosaic consists of multiple contiguous protection measures designated independently by different authorities using different legislation, but those are managed collaboratively using a common shared adaptive management and monitoring framework, okay. So they say that unlike a single large conservation plan, okay, a protected area mosaic is made up of many protected areas, okay, and which is located next to each other. Now these areas may be created by different governments or authorities using different laws, but they are managed together using a shared system for monitoring and improving conservation efforts, okay. Now though mosaic the yeah this the mosaic approach can be used to achieve a more meaningful scale of protection, more likely to incorporate key features required to ensure its long-term viability. Okay, so they say that using the mosaic approach can create a longer and more effective protected region, which is more likely to include important ecological features needed for long-term conservation success. Okay, though mosaics designed a priori exist, most emerge post hoc, resulting from the acknowledgement of the potential collective impact surpassing benefits that would have been achieved solely through the sum of their parts. Okay, so they say that sometimes mosaics are planned in advance, okay, though mosaics designed up a priori, planned in advance, okay, most emerge post hack, okay, but most of them are formed later, okay, when people realize that several protected areas working together can have a better impact than each working alone. Okay, so basically this particular paragraph talks about a protected area mosaic, okay, and they say that where multiple nearby protected areas, okay, they are managed by different authorities, they work together, they can help balance conservation trade-offs and create longer and more effective protection for ecosystem. Okay, let's see the last paragraph of the passage. So once established, spatial protection measures can face challenges associated with non-compliance, whether established through legal or other effective means. Legality does not necessarily equate with effectiveness, okay. So they say that even after spatial protection areas are created, okay, problems can arise if people do not follow the rules, okay. So once established, protection can face challenges associated with the non compliance, okay. So people not accepting the rules, okay, whether those rules are legal laws or they are other effective means or other management measures, okay. Legality does not necessarily equate with effectiveness. Just because a conservation measure is legal or written in law does not mean that it will actually work well. Okay, effectiveness remains the crux of long term conservation impact, measured as the health viability of the conservation targets. Okay, so they say that the most important thing for conservation is whether it is effective in the long run, and this is judged by how healthy and sustainable the protected species or ecosystems remain. Okay, now, effectiveness simply cannot be assumed and must be demonstrated through appropriate management and monitoring frameworks, including appropriate effectiveness indicators. So, they say that we cannot just simply assume conservation measures are working, okay? So, they must be checked, okay, and proven through proper management, okay, monitoring frameworks and appropriate effectiveness indicators that can actually measure the success, okay. Effectiveness ultimately is assessed by evaluating the achievement of the healthy viability goals against an agreed upon baseline. So in the end, conservation success is measured by comparing the current condition of systems, okay, with their earlier condition, okay, which is actually the baseline, okay, and to see if health and survival have improved. Okay, so basically this paragraph talks about spatial conservation measures are only successful if they are effectively implemented and monitored, okay, since legal protection alone does not guarantee real conservation. Okay, so it's all a simple passage as a whole. So so in case if I'm going to talk about the passage as a whole, so passage explains that how spatial conservation, okay, it actually protects important ecological areas, okay, spatially the marine habitat for seabirds, okay, by managing specific geographical location. Now, later on, it highlights the successful conservation requires appropriate policies, laws, and international commitment, okay, and along with choosing a right type, comprehensive, targeted, or mosaic, okay, approaches. Now, the passage also stresses that legal protection alone is not enough, okay. Conservation efforts must be effectively implemented, monitored, and evaluated. Okay, so this was the passage all about. I hope you were able to get the sense of this passage. See you with the next series.